something today that I don't think I've ever done before. I want to make 2 announcements about harvests. Next week at our adult ed, we have a harpist named David Pavlovich. He's going to come and he's going to play for us. He's going to start about 10:20 so that you know, so you want to get over there a little bit sooner than usual. And just set that mood. The harp does so well. He'll then speak about his 25 years of using music in therapeutic settings such as hospitals to show how it can play a role in healing, both physically and spiritually. So I invite you to be part of that. And that just leads me right into our next big performance. On Friday, we had an amazing performance by these ladies over here. And our next concert is March the 25th. It is Honor Ferretti. You might remember her from our open house. She was here playing. And she's going to play her harp that day for us. And so I invite you to be part of that. There will be more information as you go along. Don't forget that tonight is Sunday night at the movies. Selma is going to be playing. And if you haven't seen that movie, you should watch it. If you have seen that movie, you should talk about it. And that's what happens in both of these things. Yes?
Not a harp, but Cynthia Hilt, one of my guests today, will be having a concert here on February 23rd.
Nice. Thank you very much.
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock. Good to have you here. I'm so glad you're going to do that. So look for that information. Last thing I want you to know about is we need you to be here this Saturday night at 6 o'clock right in the community center because I want you to make it so that a bunch of kids go to Peru. All right? They're having a Taste of Peru dinner. They're going to get this meal all ready for you. I'm sure they're cooking it all their very selves, those teenagers. But they will at least bring it to your table and help you to have a good time. But mostly this is about raising money for them. And so come and support them as they head off to Peru. We'll be going end of June, early July is when we're going.
Jim, one of the cooks will be a guy named Manuel Gadea who works with me and who comes from a little town called Lima.
Little teeny town. So today I want to tell you about one of my great spiritual experiences. But to do that, I have to tell you just one little piece of theology that you may not know. Mormons and Baptists have a natural enmity. They don't like each other. You know why? Because they both know that both of them can't be right. And so they have a wariness about themselves and about the other. And they build walls between them. And it's borne up with decades of mistrust and decades of not quite treating each other perfectly. And yet in this great spiritual experience that I want to tell you about, I found myself in the company of Baptists. And I hadn't wanted to come to that place. It's the last place I wanted to be, but after a long and painful climb out of a dark well where I had found myself spiritually, I was beginning to want to discover what else could be. I'd rediscovered a need to be in holy places, and the problem was I lived in this little tiny town that had about as many people in it as are in this sanctuary now. And so I couldn't go to a church in that town. I couldn't go back to the church that I'd come from, couldn't go to any of those churches, and especially not to that Baptist church on the corner. So I arranged with my friend Kim to go with her to church. We were up at Flagstaff in a meeting, and so I thought I'd go home with her, we'd go to church, and it was a nice, safe, unknown Lutheran church, and by that I mean they didn't know me and I didn't know them. So it wasn't intimidating. But as the meeting ended, she spoke some of the most devastating words to me that I'd ever heard in my life. She said, "Jim, I feel Spirit telling me differently." hate it when people listen. Because it meant that I had to start that long trip home. Back to that little town. And there were plenty of places I could have stopped at, but for some reason, my heart kept drawing me forward. And the space that I was feeling drawn to was that Baptist church on the corner that I didn't want to go to. That image in my heart just kept growing and drawing me and saying, go there. And I didn't want to go because that's the one I'd been taught to hate so much and not want and push away. And yet, I felt Spirit calling, drawing, luring me even towards that church. Our contemporary reading for next service says this. It was written by Anne Mortefee. Our attachment to our own story limits our freedom. We cling to the woes of the past as if they justify the present. We limit our potential, remaining devoted to limiting beliefs. We repeat ourselves endlessly, never realizing a new road ahead lies waiting. Have you ever been stuck behind walls like that? Walls that maybe they built, maybe you built, that for some reason you're sitting inside of them and saying, this is all that can be. I can't step over there because that's where they are. That's that idea, or whatever it happens to be, but the wall's there, holding you in. So I sat in a Baptist church, wondering if I could find meaning there. And yet needing that meaning so much that I sat there, maybe incapable of moving, because I needed to see, hear, find something that I didn't have before. And then the scripture that you just read, you just heard, was read to me. John 14. And I knew that scripture. And in a very real way hated it. You know why? Because those Baptists used it. Not the scripture part that you heard, but the next couple of verses, where a disciple comes up and says, well, how do we know how to get there? And Jesus says these words, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Baptists love that scripture, except for either in their head or maybe in their words. They add a word. I am the only way, the only truth, the only life. And that word had been used to batter me about why it was that one truth was right. That Baptist church, that Baptist Jesus is the only path. And I didn't believe in the Baptist Jesus, and so I knew they were wrong. But it wasn't just that. As I had moved on my spiritual journey, I realized that I had done, in essence, the same thing. And essentially say, I have the way, the only way, the only truth, the only life, and you ought to believe it or else. But as our call to awareness said, moments arrive when we stand at that doorway. There that doorway is, inviting us to come in. And if we fail to see this moment for what it is, it may take forever to come back. This was one of those doorways for me. Could I be bold enough to step beyond? Be ever vigilant, it said in the call to awareness. Do not overlook the doorway into transformation when it arrives. Somehow I had to pass through this wall. I think it was probably more my need than my perception at the time that allowed me to hear something I'd never heard before. It was the first verse of that reading. You see, because when John 14 came up, I easily went to that hated verse. But the first verse says this: do not let your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. Now, I know the writer of John meant that to be, you have to believe in Jesus. But that was the Baptist Jesus. I wasn't ready for that. But I did need to believe in something more than what I already believed in. And I needed to step into a space that would allow me to do that. And to do that, I had to listen to something I hadn't listened to before. I needed to learn to listen to someone who had a different truth that could draw me beyond myself, beyond the truth I already had and knew. And beyond is not something that any of us do easily or well, because we have good reasons why we built these walls, good reasons why we're in the space that we're at, good reasons why this is enough for us. Bishop O is the president of our Council of Bishops. And about a week ago, he released a statement on immigration. It was a wonderful statement. You should read the whole thing. But he mentioned one particular verse and about how we read it wrong. And the verse was in Matthew 16, and it's that one that says, those who want to save their life will lose it. Remember that verse? And he said, sometimes, it's not that the translation is wrong, it said it doesn't go really it doesn't have the nuance that we ought to hear in it. Because if you go back to the Greek, it says more like this: whoever builds a wall around their life, around their soul, around their heart, will destroy it. And whoever tears down that wall around themselves shall bring forth living birth. Do you hear the difference? It's not that we save our life, it's that we're trying to protect our life. Protect what we already know. Keep it this way. And when we tear down that wall and step into the beyond, something amazing happens to us. See, there was this wall I erected around the truth, and I was on one side and those Baptists were on the other. But so was the truth I needed to hear. So was that thing which would draw me out of this space which was keeping me bound. So was that which I had to have in order to continue living. Anne Mortefee goes on to say, our creative spirit, our thoughts, our feelings decide the pathway forward. Let go of the stepping stones of the past. Step forward into whatever the moment brings. Allow life to unfold as the adventure it was meant to be. When we remain behind our walls, however important those walls were, whatever stones of doctrine or belief or action or whatever that we've used to be able to build those walls, when we step beyond them, we open ourselves to the grand adventure that is Spirit, to the grand adventure where God lies. But to get there, we have to believe what in the moment feels like a bit of foolishness, because we've erected those walls because here we understand, here we feel safe, and stepping beyond them is anything but. So I want you to indulge me for a second as I tell you about a bit of foolishness that I have. Bush is a group that sings a song. It's a great anti-war ballad called War. And they sing it wonderfully and well, and there's these lines that they sing during one of the pieces that I hear again and again and again. And I think I know exactly what it says. Have you ever done that where you're listening to the lyrics and you know what it says, but it's not really what they say? I like my lyrics better. Their lyrics are okay, but my made-up lyrics are great. It asks the question, what if peace rocks? What if what we're afraid of? What if that thing on the other side of that wall, whatever we built that wall against, what if that is so wondrously important to us that it really allows our spirits to grow? What would happen if we would allow ourselves to step into that fearful space, that space beyond, and let that stuff grow and move? What if? What if we weren't afraid to step into that space? Rise against things. My dreams are not unlike yours. They long for the safety, and they break like a glass chandelier. But there's laughter, and oh, there is love just past the edge of our fears. And there's chaos when push comes to shove. But it's music to my ears. You see, that we're afraid of will play different tunes into our heart. That which we're afraid of will show us different images. That we're afraid of will draw us somewhere wondrously new. But we have to have courage to step there. Jordan Drydale Roberts lives in Montana, works for the government up there. And this week he chose to tear down a wall. He was asked to start processing papers that he knew would ultimately end up with ICE having those papers in order to deport people. He said, I'm not willing to do that. He quit his job. He should not quit his job. He has a young baby, about 2 years old. He has, his wife is in grad school and is underemployed. They depend on his job. And yet he had to step beyond into that space of what can be. He's in some kind of marvelous journey. Where it will lead, he's not sure. He said, I'm doing this because I have a child, and I want to be able to look that child in the eye. And so he sees a dream for that child that leads him beyond himself. He makes the courageous step into the beyond. And when you take that step, sooner or later, you discover it was right, that it often takes a long time and a bit of patience to be able to know it was the right thing, to be able to get to that realization. But as Shinedown sings, nothing ever feels quite the same as when you are what you dream. The call to word has told us, do not for the fear of the risk miss the chance to step through that door of transformation. And you know why? Because you know what calls us beyond that door, past those walls? You know what calls us? The very God that we think we're holding on to here. And yet God is present here, but God is also drawing us there. And when we get past whatever it is that binds us in this place, we discover a bigger God, a more loving God, a larger God than we ever imagined. In my case, it was a little Baptist church. It was the doorway to my transformation. And it's not because that beyond was the right answer for me, that Baptist church, because I was only there for just a few months. But in there, that space of love and differentness that they gave me, I discovered the Spirit that led me further down the road of my journey. It helped me to go past and step beyond what it was that I already knew. It helped me to hear the voice of the beyond. A feisty young woman here gave me a poem last week, but she said, we ought to use that again. So I'm using it. It says, oh, the places you'll go on this road that you trod as you learn how to hear the voice known as God. It won't always be easy or breezy or fun, and sometimes when you hear it, you'll want to run. For God calls us away from all that we know and leads us to places, some high and some low. God leads us inside our demons to fight, then leads us abroad to discover the light. God leads through deep valleys to mountains above. God calls us to follow, to trust, and to love. Our souls, ever restless, seek for anything more. But God, ever faithful, opens just the right door. And with courage, we choose to walk through it and find how it brings us to new dreams, both yours and mine. Dreams that seem marvelously, wondrously new, that draw us beyond all the places we knew. Oh, the places God leads us. Don't be afraid. Don't let your hope or your energy fade, for God is still leading, the community true, and the places are marvelous for me and for you, if we listen to the voice.
Listen, my child, you say to me, I am the voice of your history. Be not afraid, come follow me. Answer my call and I'll set you free. I am the voice in the wind and the pouring rain. I am the voice of your hunger and pain. I am the voice that always is calling you. I am the voice, I will remain. I am the voice in the fields when the summer's gone. The dance of the leaves when the autumn's wind blows. There do I sleep throughout all the cold winter long. I am the force that in springtime will grow. I am the voice of the past that will always be filled with my sorrow and blood in my fields. I am the voice of the future. Bring me your peace. Bring me your peace in my wounds. They will heal. I am the voice in the wind and the pouring rain. I am the voice of your hunger and pain. I am the voice that always is calling you. I am the voice. I am the voice of the past that will always be. I am the voice of your hunger and pain. I am the voice of the future. I am the voice. I am the voice. I am the voice. I am the voice.
So when you hear that voice calling you and suddenly you come up against that wall, find a way to climb over that wall. Or find the key that opens the door, or if you need to, find the TNT that blows it all up. But get beyond that wall. Go into that space and discover God again. Amen? Let's stand and sing.